What is a fighting game without its fighters? The characters that are the lifeblood of these games, from iconic figures like Ryu in Street Fighter to Kazuya in Tekken, Soul in Guilty Gear, and Raiden in Mortal Kombat. We all have our favorites, but there are some fighters who never had the chance to shine in the spotlight. Throughout the history and development of fighting games, numerous characters were created and thought of but never made it into full releases. Reasons for this can range from development changes to issues with gameplay balance. As a result, many intriguing remnants of these characters are left behind in our favorite fighting games. This video is a personal quest to unearth some of these hidden gems, from the well-known to the obscure. The Persona franchise has become a household name, and as a die-hard fan, I have lost countless hours to its rich worlds and characters. When Persona 4 Arena and its sequel, Arena Ultimax, were released, I was instantly hooked. Persona 3, specifically, holds a special place in my heart, so witnessing the growth of the Shadow Operatives after the events of the original game was immensely gratifying. Ultimax expanded on this, introducing characters like Yukari and Ken, who had evolved and leaned into their characters after the original game's story concluded. With the addition of DLC characters, Adachi, Marie, and Margaret, the game felt complete, showcasing the diverse and beloved cast of these two games. One of the game's most fascinating features is the concept of shadow variants. Each character possesses a shadow counterpart, which introduces a more aggressive playstyle, and an ability called Shadow Frenzy, which grants unlimited SP at the cost of some defensive capabilities. However, not everyone has a shadow counterpart. All DLC characters, Adachi, Margaret, and Marie, lack shadow variants. Similarly, base game characters like Elizabeth and Shomi Nizuki are also missing their shadows. While Shadow Labris stands apart as a separate character, but Labris does still have a separate shadow counterpart. Technically, there are two Shadow Labrises. This might sound confusing, but for most of these, there is a logical in-universe explanation. Adachi does have story-based reasons for not having a shadow, and characters from the Velvet Room generally do not possess shadows due to their unique control over their personas. However, within the game's files, we can discover art for Shadow Marie, complete with her arcade portrait, ending portrait, and windscreens. While adding the simple touches to her design to make her a shadow is straightforward, it's notable that Marie never confronts a shadow version of herself within the game. The decision to exclude a shadow variant for her likely stemmed from wanting to maintain consistency among the DLC characters, which makes the following mysterious text string in the game's executable file even more interesting. Stuck between Adachi and Marie in the game's files. Persona 4 Arena Ultimax launched in arcades in Japan in 2013 and consoles in the US in 2014, with the DLC characters following as DLC almost immediately later that year, well before the release of Persona 5. However, the first glimpse of Joker actually appeared in a September 2014 trailer, the same month that Ultimax released, teasing what would eventually become his persona, Arsene. What makes this even more interesting is the presence of unused audio files that contain announcer callouts for P5 Hero and Persona 5 Hero.
P5 Hero. Persona 5 Hero.
Alongside references to Mephistopheles, a demon that was initially intended to be Joker's persona.
Mephistopheles.
Director Katsura Hashino confirmed this in an episode of the Persona Stalker Club web series, but we are left wondering what this version of Mephistopheles would have looked like in Persona 5. Although we do have early concept art of Joker, it's likely that if he were to appear in Persona 4 Arena, he would have used a design very close to the final version. Outside of these hints and callouts, there is little else remaining of this character. As of now, the hope for a Persona 5 arena featuring the diverse cast of Phantom Thieves remains just that, a hope. Now we've arrived at Tekken 3, one of the most beloved entries in the Tekken series as a whole. This game is notable for making the bold choice to eliminate Kazuya Mishima, a franchise staple, and introduce Jin Kazama as his son. However, several more characters were left out, including fan favorites like Li Xiaolan and Martial Law, the latter's moveset being inherited by his son, Forest Law. During the development of Tekken 3, there was an idea to introduce a character named Sake, a salmon, as a playable fighter in the arcade release. Ultimately, Sake was scrapped, and director Katsuhiro Harada shared that arcade players would likely be frustrated trying to control a flopping fish in a game that charged every time you played it. And so Sake was cut from the game. Remnants of Sake still exist within the arcade release. If you load the game with certain commands, Sake uses Yoshimitsu's model but retains Jin's moveset, complete with a unique flopping sound effect whenever he punches that isn't found anywhere else in the game. Moreover, an announcer callout for Sake can be discovered in the game's files. But Sake is not the only unused character from Tekken 3. Hidden within the files are audio clips for Kazuya Mishima and Jun Kazama, both from Tekken 2. While Kazuya's presence is merely a remnant of his Tekken 2 days, Jun actually has placeholder fighting data and can be loaded into the game using Nina's model and Jin's moveset. Notably, her loading screen features an updated portrait, indicating that her removal came late in development. Harada himself mentioned in a forum post that there was still a possibility that she could appear at that time, as the story of Tekken 3 had not been finalized. As for what happened though, Jun would only appear in Tekken Tag Tournament 1 and 2, as both herself and heavily implied to be the character unknown. Her mainline return did not come until Tekken 8, proving that even if your death is instrumental to another character's story, Tekken characters always have a chance of coming back.
Transcending history and the world, a tale of souls and swords, eternally retold.
Speaking of beloved entries in game series, I've always loved Soul Calibur 2, and I don't think I'm alone in that regard. With the inclusion of guest characters that differentiated between each platform, like Link on the GameCube, Heihachi on the PS2, and Spawn on the Xbox. Such a cool inclusion in something that we're likely to never see again in the same form. Due to the way the game was developed with these guest characters, there are character slots that go unused depending on the console version you have. The character slot that would normally hold the data for Spawn and Link holds 2 unused data for unused characters instead. Heihachi's slot specifically holds fighter data with Cassandra's model, but Heihachi's name, so nothing fancy there. The first character is known as Q Takagi in-game, and they're a very strange mishmash of characters. This one specifically loads Cassandra's Player 2 skin with Keelik's Kali Yuga weapon and Mitsurugi's moveset. This character normally takes up Spawn's data slot, so they only go unused in the PS2 and GameCube version. Takagi is speculated to be taken from Reiko Takagi, the Japanese voice actor for Cassandra in Soul Calibur 2. There is no visual concept art for this character or any idea what they would have been had their development continued. The second character is known as Wovama. They use Cassandra's Player 1 model, but with Astaroth's weapon and Nightmare's moveset. Another mishmash, but this character was teased actually in issue 147 of Electronic Gaming Monthly. There, a writer took some pictures from a VHS tape of early GameCube footage, and by early I mean early. Talim's name was Tongfar in this build, for instance. In this editorial, it's noted that some new characters are coming, including Wolvama, who's only noted as being a young, blonde female. No details about her weapon or anything else relating to her are known. This is baseless speculation on my part, but considering how early this footage was, perhaps this was a test character used to hide Link's inclusion in the game. After all, this does take up Link's slots, so who knows. Both of these characters were likely cut early in development, as they're just used to fill the empty slots that were left behind in these versions of the game. Whoever Q Takagi and Wolvama were going to be is lost to time. I used to own a copy of Urges before I even knew what Final Fantasy was. All I knew was that it felt a little bit like WWF No Mercy, and I loved it because I loved wrestling. I was a dumb kid who didn't know any better though, so the disc I used to have is straight up ruined. Looking back on this game, it's a travesty that younger me never took care of his games. So what the hell is Urges? It's this weird combination of dungeon crawler and fighting game that was super janky and felt way more arcadey than anything I was used to at that time. Suffice it to say, I was horrible at the game. My dad was actually way better at it than I was, and that's saying something considering he never played video games. The most notable fact about this game is that it's got playable Final Fantasy VII characters in it. Cloud Strife, Tifa Lockhart, Sephiroth, Yuffie, Vincent, and Zack. Not to mention the slew of other original characters this game had. Well, original being surrounded by quotes. This guy is just Jin Tekken Kazama himself. So you know the background now. Let's get into the unused data. Throughout development of Urges, there was a lot of changes. One of these changes involved a character named Rio, a female character who started off in early development as this brown-haired female with a hairband. There were screenshots of this character as the game made appearances at Tokyo Game Show in 1997, but by the game's final release, Rio was gone. There were no backgrounds or anything much to go on about what this character would have been in today's game, but it's speculated that what we know of Rio's moveset and her animations were eventually phased into Claire Andrews and Wolf Girl Joe. However, the remnants of Rio are a little more fascinating than just that. There is an unused character slot in Urges, and when it's loaded into the game, you are greeted with a rather unique character. This specific dog is used in Dream Factory's prior game, Tobal 2, where in the game's quest mode you can capture creatures and monsters and use them in the game's versus mode. That includes this dog. The dog in Urges does have Rio's name underneath the life bar, and it shares a moveset with another of the game's characters, Django, albeit without Django's special moves. Other than this strange, unused fighter though, there are no remnants of Rio left over from development in the game's files. The world of fighting games is rich with untold stories. Characters lost to time, whether due to balancing issues, changes in development, or decisions made by creative. They serve as a reminder of the creative potential behind the scenes. These unused fighters exist only as lost data in their respective games, remnants of ideas that maybe could have transformed the landscape of their franchises. While we may never see them in action today, they will continue to stir our imaginations, leaving us to wonder what could have been. Thank you for watching.